some great conversations over there, which I'm delighted to see. Would make your way over and have a seat. There are lots of seats right down front for happy people to sit in. Good. Well, welcome. My name is Joy Thea. I am the new director of the Upper House Commons, which is supported by the Stephen Laurel Brown Foundation. So that's the space you are in tonight. So we are glad you're here. We've been here for a little while this evening with many people who are reentry professionals and in the space, and we've had some great conversations. So I would encourage you tonight afterwards to introduce yourself to some of the people around you, because there are some amazing people in the space. I encourage you to make those connections and build some of those relationships, some great conversations. So, and Calvin and Sophie will also be staying around afterwards to sign books. We do have books in the back for a suggested donation of $20. So Calvin will sign the book for you, and Sophie will sign the book for you afterwards. So many of you might not have been in this space before, and you say, what is this space? And I'll tell you that is a great question. This is a space that is funded by the Stephen Laurel Brown Foundation. We call it the Upper House Commons, and it is designed as a space to help us create deep spiritual and intellectual formation with the University of Wisconsin-Madison community. And so we hope that this conversation tonight is part of that deep conversation and causes you to think deeply about these things. So on your seat, I just made this up. We call it a seat sheet. I don't know. I just made that up. We have a list of our events with a QR code on it, and I would like you to be able to take that with you so that you can follow along to some of our events and know what's happening in this space. In addition, I'm going to have them put up on the screen. We are going to do questions a little differently. Maybe you've done them this way before. But tonight, we are going to let you use a QR code. You can put your question in, so you can see the QR code up in the corner, and make it maybe a little bigger, and see so that you can type your question in. Phil is going to monitor those questions, and at the end, that's the questions that will be asked at the end of the evening. So Phil's totally prepared for this and knows exactly what he's doing. So I'll have you do those questions that way. So books are in the back, and so afterwards you can head back there to get a book that's signed. But I'm going to introduce Phil. Phil is going to introduce our guests, but Phil, you may all know Phil Haslanger. He has been in our community for a very long time, 34 years, at the Capital Times in many roles. And now he serves on a couple of news service boards, and also he also gives advice to the University of Wisconsin, their journalism program and their ethics. So that's a very big part of his role, but little you might not know is that Phil is also an ordained minister and has served as a pastor. He also is very involved in the justice work in this community and has been involved in that. And best part is he's married to Ellen Reuters, and he has 4 adult children. So I'm going to let Phil introduce our guests, but we're thankful they're here. So thank you.
Thanks, Joy. It's sort of obvious who's who here, but Calvin Duncan, Sophie Cull are with us tonight. I want to give you just a little sense of the story of Calvin and a little bit about how Sophie got connected to it, so we can get more into the substance of the things he talks about in his book. Calvin grew up poor in New Orleans. He had a scrape with the law when he was 14, getting arrested for shoplifting. Throughout his youth, he was trying to support his sister in any way that he could. They weren't always legal. In 1982, when he was 19, he was getting vocational training at a Job Corps program in Mount Hood, Oregon. And one day police showed up and arrested him for a murder that had occurred 6 months earlier in New Orleans. He correctly insisted he knew nothing about the crime, but he was taken to jail in New Orleans. A man in his early 20s named David Yeager had been shot at a bus stop when 2 black youths tried to rob him and his girlfriend, Christy Emberling, who was 15 at the time. She later identified the killer as Calvin from a photo lineup based on a photo from that arrest for shoplifting 5 years earlier. The night of the murder, Calvin was more than a mile away painting his aunt's apartment. His lawyer did virtually no research, presented a minimal defense. The eyewitness testimony was unreliable. The description of the assailants did not match his appearance. But none of that mattered. Calvin was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Calvin, you have a wonderful paragraph in your book sort of describing what that led to. Could you read that for us?
For 23 years, I served as an inmate counsel or a jailhouse lawyer at Angola prison in Louisiana. I was incarcerated there for a murder I didn't commit. I learned the law in the shadows.
So after years of efforts and frustrations and remarkable persistence, Calvin finally managed to get his own case reopened with the help of the Innocence Project in New Orleans. In 2011, the district attorney agreed to Calvin's release based on time served in exchange for a plea deal. Later, in 2021, 10 years later, Calvin was finally exonerated. This past spring, at the age of 60, he received his actual law degree from Lewis and Clark University in Oregon. In that journey after prison, he began working with Sophie Cull at a law office in New Orleans, and they would often travel together to Shreveport to work with others for the removal of the Confederate flag from the courthouse lawn there. In the process, they learned to trust each other, and Calvin shared with Sophie more and more of his life. She's a criminal justice reform advocate whose work focuses on excessive sentencing and harsh punishments, and she's the co-founder of the Visiting Room Project, which has the world's largest collection of filmed interviews with people serving life without parole. And she also spent a bit of time with some writers' events through Upper House. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Calvin's book tells the story of his work in prison, but even more, it tells what it's like to live behind the walls and what it's like to work with a justice system that in so many ways is unjust. So I'd like to divide our conversation tonight into three parts, and then save some time for questions at the end. You can use the QR code to send in your questions of one of the ones you think I should pose to Calvin and Sophie. Periodically, I think the QR code will show up, so you can scan it onto your phones. If you don't want to use the QR code, you can find one of the staff members here and just tell them to do it for you. So I want to talk a little bit about the injustice of the justice system and life behind walls, and then getting out and adjusting, having to make decisions in fear of what goes on, which people who work in reentry work are really familiar with some of those issues. But let's start with the injustice of what happens in court. What are a couple of the moments in that long journey of dealing with a justice system that doesn't have justice? What are some of the moments that illustrate that for you?
Yes, so I was 19 when I was arrested and extradited to New Orleans. And they put me on a unit with guys that already been sentenced to death. Some had already been in prison for a long period of time. And I was telling them that I didn't commit the crime that I'm in prison for. And all of them told me that I was going to be executed. And I'm like, well, I didn't do it. He said, well, look, you got the same lawyer that I had, same judge that I had. And the judge that we had, his name was Frank Shea. He had one day, he had 6 felony jury trials in one day. And they said, you had the same prosecutor. And what made it even worse, the victim, the young man in my case, he was white. And the witness in my case was white. So they was telling me I was going to get the death penalty. And I started asking them, well, how could I help myself? And then they told me, look, you got to become a lawyer. You got to learn the law. And I actually that's what started me into actually got me trying to learn the law to save myself. And then once I started learning it, I started helping other people as well.
Yeah. But when you were doing that, you found out that the legal system did not make it easy for people who were in prison.
Yes. So they was telling me I had to learn the law, become a lawyer, but they didn't have access. I didn't have access to legal material. And I always, I kind of share this with the other audience, so you get a full picture. The only legal material initially that I was able to get my hand on was newspaper clippings. And I always say I used to be happy and was glad when some rich person got arrested, because they always put some law in there. And I would use that to create my law book. But that wasn't enough. Then I filed a motion for a law book. And I explained to the Supreme Court that my lawyer's not coming to see me. I'm facing a capital offense. And I don't have any legal material. And the night before my trial, the two lawyers that represented me came to the prison to see if I had clothes to wear. And the next morning, I went to trial. My trial lasted a day. The government position was that I should be executed. However, the jury rejected the death penalty, and I was sentenced to spend the remainder of my life in prison.
And Sophie, as you've heard Calvin's stories about bumping up against over and over and over again a justice system that really just didn't want to deal with any of this, are there stories that stick out for you?
Yeah, many. I think this is something Calvin will talk about later, but one of the things that struck me was going through Calvin's files was how many times he asked a government agency for records in his own case that were never given or shared with him. So police, the number of times he wrote to the police department asking for the records of what happened on the night of the crime, why he was the person who'd been arrested. He had no idea. They wouldn't give them to him. He asked the DA's office for his file. They didn't respond. He asked the clerk of court for his file. They ignored his letters. It's like at every turn, Calvin did anything he could to find out what case the state was going to bring against him, and he just hit a brick wall every time. And the story that sticks out to me the most from his time in the parish prison when he was trying to do that was that at a certain point, Calvin had an estranged grandfather who died and left him a very small inheritance of a couple of $100s that he didn't expect to get. So he said, yes, this is my moment. I finally have some cash in the bank. I'm going to hire an investigator to go and get those records for me. So he contacts an investigator that he'd met in the courtroom during his trial to ask for this person to go collect those records, gives him all the money that he has to his name, which at that point is about $200. And instead of following through and bringing Calvin the records he so desperately needed, the investigator took the money and never fulfilled the job. Calvin had to spend 2 years filing civil suits in court to recover the money that investigator took from him to try once again to turn around and ask the next agency for his records. And that's the beginning of his journey, not the end of it.
Yeah. And I used the word persistence in the beginning, which I think really characterizes that long journey you had. And there were times you got really discouraged about what was happening. And one I remember you were trying, there was a change in law, and so persons could get these records. So you asked for them. And I think it was the DA who said to you
that I wasn't a person?
Yeah.
So Louisiana is the incarceration capital of the world, really. We incarcerate more people than any place. And New Orleans contribute to that. And so one of the things that they knew that they knew we wasn't going to get access to our records that would prove our innocence. And when we start getting those access to police reports that proved that a lot of us was innocent, then we got access to the prosecutor's file, and then they imposed a deadline on us. But then they passed a law that declared people like me, after a certain period of time, not to be considered to be a person for the purpose of getting our public records. And so that kind of like really crushed us until a third-year law student, Emily Bolton, came to the prison, and we explained to her that there's a lot of us innocent, a lot of us not innocent, but we wasn't afforded a fair trial, and we can't get our records. And she promised that once she graduated, she was going to actually come and help us, and she did. And right now, New Orleans has a high per capita exoneration rate in the United States. And so, we, without our records, we can't prove our innocence. And Louisiana just was set bent on making sure that we did get those records. And then when we finally get the records, it's too late. They tell us that we missed the deadline, and therefore we got to die in prison.
Yeah. And I think two things. One is the fact that Louisiana has the highest exoneration record says something about how awful the system was before, but also you had something to do with making that happen, that people could get exonerated.
Yeah, so I'm a co-founder of New Orleans and Innocent Project. And so whenever we got, like my job was being a jailhouse lawyer. But let me explain what that is. In the book, we are referred to as inmate counsel substitute. But on the outside, I refer to us as jailhouse lawyers because people could really easily appreciate and follow the story. Our job was actually to help people that wasn't afforded a fair trial, people that was innocent. It was our job. That was a job inside our prison, that they would train us to be that person for people that couldn't afford lawyers. In Louisiana, once you appeal, once that appeal stage is over, you're not entitled to a lawyer. And we didn't have lawyers. And so the institution has, in every institution in the United States, everybody in prison, the institution has a constitutional duty to provide people in prison with access to the courts. Where in the 70s, the Supreme Court outlined what that access could look like, a floor. But then when the courts started changing and it got more judges on the bench in the Supreme Court that didn't believe in all these liberties that we somehow got in the 60s, they started eroding and taking it back. But every institution has a duty to provide access. In Louisiana, they actually take that constitutional duty serious, and they train us to be that lawyer. What we couldn't do was leave the prison and to do the investigation that we need, you know. And so I always say, in a joking way, that they could have let me go, let me out. I would have investigated and came back and help the people that I was trying to help. But we had to rely on the outside world actually to help us. And it took a young lady from England actually to come to help us. And now we have, you could Google to see exactly that a lot of innocent people, and we was all innocent from the same parish, same. I don't know if they call them parishes here, but we call them parishes. It might be counties.
Counties here.
From the same prosecutor office. They had one prosecutor. His name is Jim Williams. He prosecuted at least 6 people, put them on death row. That was innocent. And he had a trophy. And he had their picture on that trophy. Just one guy. And throughout the years, everybody on that trophy, except one, all of them was totally exonerated. One went back to trial and was found guilty. And I tell that story because I generally want people to understand that it's not a whole bunch of people causing all this havoc. In that case, it was one person. A whole bunch of people stood by and allowed him to do it. But it just was that one person convicted all of those innocent people, had them on death row, was about to be executed. And so the only reason why they got out is because they, in Louisiana, you're entitled to a lawyer if you're lucky enough to get the death penalty. But if you're not lucky enough to get the death penalty, you'll be like me, you got to rely on the jailhouse lawyer.
Yeah, and one of the reasons the jailhouse lawyers could get a lot of business is if I'm in prison and I have a lot of money, I can hire a lawyer on the outside. 90% of the people in prison can't do that.
Exactly. I've never, ever in my whole 28 years in prison, and it is right now, I don't know anybody in prison that had money. They had one guy that I used to file his case. His name is Aaron Mintz. Aaron Mintz had a lot of money, and the jury that acquitted him after they interviewed the jury, they came out and said, we know he committed his crime. Yet the government didn't carry his burden of proof. So Most of us, not just. I've never met anybody in prison that could afford a lawyer. So no. I'm gonna take that back. Some people, family do sacrifice their rent money, sacrifice their mortgage, the light bill to actually pay a lawyer to help their loved one. But for the most part, no, the only people that they have is people like me. And later, if we have enough room, I could explain one case where this guy was about to be executed, and he couldn't get his records.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you were helping people contest their cases. That was a big part of your work. But you were also helping take care of some of the conditions within the prison to file motions that would stop some of the really cruel things that were happening. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so once I got to Angola is the, I don't know if you all heard of Angola. The Louisiana State Penitentiary was once the bloodiest prison in America. But once I got to Angola, once I was given, my a life sentence, I always say that the Paris jail was hell, and going to Angola was like paradise. And I had to get to Angola because that's where the law library was. That's where the access to legal material was at. And after I got there, I applied for the job of being a jailhouse lawyer. And I was assigned actually to help people that had really had some serious mental issues going on. And they was placed on a unit. And they was being abused. And they basically was being abused because the guards was not properly trained on how to treat people with mental illness. And they did terrible things to them. And then I would actually file. 1983 action, civil rights action, and actually try to help those people in the mental health unit get better treatment. And through the blessings of God, they did start getting better treatment. But
Yeah. And so Sophie, as you were hearing Calvin's stories about the legal system in Louisiana, you're looking at it from the outside. And how did this start to touch you?
Oh, great question. I think something about working with Calvin. So by the time Calvin and I started working on the book, I'd been working with criminal defense teams for 7 or 8 years. And we're taught from, I'm not an attorney, but in terms of providing representation, about what's always in the best interest of the client. And that's often framed, especially in death penalty cases, in what might seem from the outside as sort of a paternalistic exercise, which is that you're anticipating the best interests of your client, whether they articulate them or not, and then doing whatever you can to sort of protect those interests. So in death penalty cases, that usually means working really hard to try to get the state to agree to a plea that will allow your client to come off of death row and be given a life without parole sentence. Of course, speaking to Calvin about what it means to have a life without parole sentence, and most importantly, to lose access to a lawyer, really drove home for me what we were asking our clients to do. It wasn't just that they would be removed from death row, but they'd lose access to the one lifeline they had to their defense. And they would then be left alone to serve a life without parole sentence without the hope of a lawyer ever coming to see them again. So Calvin really taught me a lot about, Calvin says people were trying to kill us our whole lives, getting to prison and being told we were going to be killed by the state. Didn't really hit us the way it might have hit you as an advocate, because that's just the reality we lived in one form or another since we were kids. And I think what Calvin really helped me to understand was from the perspective of someone on the inside, how different what does it really mean to show your client that you're fighting for them and standing up for them looked really different from his perspective than the one that I might have learned from the criminal defense side.
Calvin, one of the things you wrote about is how as you took on this work of being the jailhouse lawyer and helping other people, that was one of the ways you found meaning for your life when there weren't a lot of opportunities to find that. How did that, when did you begin to put those pieces together?
Yeah, so my childhood was terrible. Like a friend of mine, once he read the book, he said, "Man, your life was terrible before you went to prison." And I said, something, you're so right. I knew that. But But once I got to prison, and then I started reading, I started talking to older guys, and I started reading about Bill of Rights, and one guy in the book called Slim Jenkins, he's telling me about, the Constitution, and he talks about the Bill of Rights, the 10 Bill of Rights, and I'm learning all of this stuff. And because I'm not really educated, I'm believing the stuff that I'm reading. Like I'm taking this stuff serious. that a person accused of a crime, the Bill of Rights, over half of the Bill of Rights was enacted to protect people like me. Half. In law school, you wouldn't know that. You think it's only about one or two. The First Amendment, free speech, and the Second Amendment to carry the Second Amendment. But the Bill of Rights is half of it is directed to protecting people like me. So now I'm reading this stuff that I have a right to a fair trial. I have a right to a lawyer. I have a right to not to be tried by an angry judge. I'm reading that prosecutors not supposed to prosecute, but they're supposed to seek justice. And I'm reading all this stuff, and I believe it now. This is the first time I'm actually hearing it. And I'm like, yeah, I can get with this. I could feel like other people feel. I could stand up and say, I have these rights. And then I could stand up and say, all of the people that need help have these rights. And then petition the government to actually make these rights a reality for us. But in the 80s, it was very hard. The 80s had a score to settle. They had just, like got through the 70s because they was all, they're kind of like angry at the Earl Warren Court for giving us all these liberties. And they was kind of like on a movement to take all of our liberties from us. And then I'm watching the United States Supreme Court do just that. And I had a friend, and he's in the book, and I'm not going to tell y'all everything about the book. Y'all can read it, once we autograph it. He would say, Calvin, you keep talking about your rights. And he was like, your rights are what those Supreme Court judges say is your rights. And I'm like, okay. And I'm reading this, and I'm watching it, how year after year, they erode in some of these things, these constitutional rights that I so madly fell in love with. And just seeing them just be eroded was kind of like a shock. I don't know if I got off the question.
You did, but that's okay. But one of the things you talked about is how this also gave meaning to your life. One of the ways you could survive behind the wall.
Exactly. The meaning that it gave was that is just the power that law give you. Like it gives you a lot of power. And how you wield it it depends on the type of person you are. I could take this power that I have and abuse it, or I could take it and do good. And so I decided to take it and do good. Do like some of the things, and I'm just going to regress. So in prison, I was trying to, in the book, it talks about how we struggled in trying to identify what is a man. I grew up knowing what men were, that is, ones that shoot dope, kill people, break into each other's houses, don't go to school. That's a man to me. But then I go to prison, and now I'm seeing the abuse that they're doing. So I struggle with the concept of being a man. But then I started reading stuff like Martin Luther King. And then I got, dibbing and dabbing with the Bible, reading the story about this guy they called Jesus. How he was kind of like he was like a Superman in my eye, standing up saying, no, you're not going to execute this woman on my watch. No, you're not going to stop me from helping this person over there. And you're not going to, I'm going to champion the cause of all these other people. And so that started giving me meaning that I could do the same thing, helping other people at the same time trying to help myself. And that's the meaning, and that's what I've built my whole life in doing. Once I got out, and also after I got out. That's the meaning that it gave me after learning about those two individuals.
One of the things that struck me is one of the threads that runs through your life is helping other people. And that was part of where you got the meaning from. But looking out for your sister.
Yeah.
And then Sophie was talking to you about the story of this hotel in New Orleans where you worked. And I don't know, you guys set it up. You know the story better than I do.
Sophie could tell you, yes.
Yeah,
I like to hear Sophie talk.
So Calvin, when Calvin first came home, about a week after Calvin got out, he, a lot of the law offices in New Orleans, like who's going to get to convince Calvin to come work for them? Everybody wanted Calvin to come work for them. So we were lucky enough to win that battle, and Calvin agreed to come and work at our law office. And he and I would start taking walks, down the street to get coffee. And at that time, Calvin was, learning everything for the first time, which I'm sure you'll speak about, Calvin. But I remember this great moment when we walked into the coffee shop. And there's like the blackboard with all the options and the lattes and the cappuccinos and the drip coffee and the whatever. And Calvin said, Wilbert Rideau told me one thing. When you get out of prison, don't make any decisions you don't have to make. So tell me what coffee I want. So, we're on one of these walks this day. And there's this hotel a couple of blocks down from our office on the way to that coffee shop called La Pavilion. And Calvin just pointed it out like it was nothing. He said, I used to work there. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Calvin worked before he went to prison, so now I'm doing the math. Well, he went to Oregon when he was 18, so that must have meant he worked there as a teenager. So I'm just putting this together, okay. And then so I asked him a little bit about the job. He said, yeah, see that side door? So I used to be the night manager, and there's people living on the street. And I would open that side door when I was on duty, and I would bring them all in, and then I would show them to empty rooms. They could wash, they could clean their clothes. I'd take them down to the kitchen, they could get a hot plate. And then, some of them would like to kind of stick around and help out in the kitchen and do their thing. At the end of the day, at the end of the night, I would give them pay for their time, and then they would leave again. And he said eventually the day manager started to cotton on. There's these people walking around the hotel at night who are not guests. And he was like, I'm for sure I was going to get fired. But I think he realized why I was doing it, and he turned a blind eye. And I remember thinking that day, it really was sort of like the question that, for me, defined the book, or my process of wanting to write this book with Calvin and try to answer this question, which is what made Calvin the man that he became. And I think at that point, until I heard that story, I had assumed that it was the harm done to him as a wrongfully convicted person that motivated him to want to help other people. That day I realized, no, Calvin put his job on the line as a 16-year-old to help homeless people, get the things that they needed just out of the goodness of his heart. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting story. Now I really got to find out, who Calvin really is.
Yeah, and that really continues in the stories you tell about the guys inside who you were helping out. And even the folks who were dealing with mental illness, you were finding a way to help them where other people might not want to do that.
Yeah, that's I take pride in that. Actually, I wasn't always a spiritual person, but I'm often saying the only time people gonna see the face of Jesus is from us. Even in some act of kindness, and it goes a long way. It's just like what Sophie said earlier. And I try to help lawyers understand this, that somebody been trying to kill us all our life. We was being destroyed, like the book talked about how I was destroyed even before I was even my whole life. Everything about me was destruction when I was a kid, and now. And even in prison, when we would sit in these groups, we would talk about that, where things went wrong. And generally, all of us said they went wrong in our own home. And so I try to help lawyers understand that what we want, what we always want is somebody to champion our cause. We believe that lawyers is equipped to do that, and we expect them to do that. But then they be so obsessed with just trying to save us. It's like, no, we want you to fight for us. And Yeah. I'm kind of long-winded, so I'm trying.
You're doing great.
I'm trying to not to be so long.
You talked about, Martin Luther King, Jesus kind of being heroes for you. Here's a question you might expect from a guy who spends some time in church. So where did sort of a belief system guide you at all, either before you got into the prison or during there? Where did faith fit into this, if anywhere?
So before prison, my aunt that messed over me and my sister, she went to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand any of that stuff. Then once I got in prison, my aunt's telling me to pray and all this stuff. And then when I got on that unit, a guy saw me with a Bible and said, you better put that down and pick up a law book. But before that, I was in a dungeon. And my aunt, my aunt, when she came to see me, she didn't tell me it was going to be all right. She told me, Calvin, you in a place where they mess over boys. You beat they. And I didn't understand it initially. And then I had some fights, got placed in a dungeon, and I opened the Bible. And I opened the Bible to Proverbs, where it say, when destruction come upon you as a whirlwind, then you're going to call. And it says, I'm going to laugh at your calamity. And I'm like, whoa. God telling me I'm on my own. And I start studying the law.
Yeah.
And then throughout my incarceration, I'm trying to find out, where do I fit in? And I'm reading about Martin Luther King. And then I'm reading the story. And I'm not just saying that just because I'm in this audience. I'm reading the story about Jesus. And I'm making a comparison. I'm not comparing. First of all, I'm not comparing myself to Jesus, but I'm looking at reading this story that whoa, the system was trying to destroy this kid before this kid was born, for whatever reason. And then once this kid was born, they were still trying to destroy. Had to go on a run. Came back as a warrior, and I kind of like, whoa, that kind of like fits me. The system trying to destroy us. Now, how do you act now? And so read the story of Jesus stepping up when they trying to stone this lady for whatever they say that she did, and he said, no, not on my watch. It ain't happening. And then he did with this act of kindness, trying to help other people. Well, I could do that too. Read Martin Luther King stuff. I could do that too. I could fight the system with respect and dignity. I could stand up for people that can't stand up for themselves. And so I still wasn't a religious person, really. It's just like, I won't just do the Jesus thing. That's cool. I'm cool. Until I hit rock bottom. And it's like, whoa. When I hit rock bottom, it's like, whoa. And then the book talks about that. And then I just even right now my belief system is that the only time I think, well, I don't think, my belief system is just a natural thing when we see people get messed around. We just got to do something about it. Yeah. I really do think, and I really think that's the America that the world looks at, not how we look at ourselves, but the outside world outside of America looks to America as that beacon of hope. Like I read a book where they call Hotel Rwanda, when they woke up one day and just was slaughtering each other, and the people say, look, if you got some relatives in America, call them. We need some of these cowboys and these. Then this is just a joke back, the rednecks, we need them over here to get some straightened. And so the outside world looks up at us that way, and I'm like, well, because I read a lot, and so that, became who I wanted to be. But then, I just, even right now today, I always said if I ever got out of that place, and then I tell y'all exactly how I got out. That just doing the right thing, standing up for people, and understanding that some of our laws was intended for evil.
Yeah.
And some of our laws wasn't intended for evil, but once we realize that these laws are causing adverse effects, it's our duty to say, I'm going to bring this to somebody's attention, and I'm going to stop it from happening in the future.
And you did that.
Yeah.
There was a moment in this journey of persistence, there was a moment you really did hit rock bottom. You thought this was not going to go anywhere. You were stuck. It's a very dramatic moment in the book. You weren't sure you could go on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I live in a state, Louisiana, where our judges are elected. And generally, they worried about being reelected. But we always had the federal courts. The federal court would step in and say, if the judges don't have the courage to do the right thing, we're going to step in. But then in 1996, then President Clinton signed this Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, which sounded like it was against people that was going to come to this country, or people in this country that was going to pull a terrorist act. But within that law, within that big old document was some legislation that people had been introducing in Congress for years. That is, making sure that we change all our laws and bring us back to the 30s, 20s, 40s. And that law was the law that affected people in federal court. It restricted the federal judges from intervening. They made true this concept of federalism. Federal government stay out of the state's affairs. And so once that law actually was passed and signed, I met my deadline. I did my best. I litigated my case the best. But then my judge denied me because he's smart. His name is Julian Parker. He denied me in a way that he knew that the federal court wasn't going to be able to intervene. And once he did that, I always said the God of hope left me, and I was out of it. And I hit rock bottom. Because once Bill Clinton signed that law, it really tells federal judges stay out of the affairs of state convictions. And he knew that, and the way he denied me was going to make sure that I never got no relief in federal court. And that's when I crashed. I always say the God of hope left me, and then it was kind of like all over. Then the miracle happened.
Yeah. Talk about the miracle, because that was like that day or the next day. It was you were just ready to be done.
So I don't mind talking about it. I had a system I was going. I had it all planned. I got me a syringe. Some people might say, "Well, how you get a syringe in prison?" Well, they got everything in prison. Believe me, I saw more drugs in prison than I saw since I've been home 15 years. Everything exists in the prisons. Just about whether the institution want it to be that way. That's not the issue. Whether it's a good thing, that's not even. But it's there. So I got me a syringe. And I knew what battery acid does. And so I had my concoction. I was ready to inject it. And then the guard called me. Said, "Calvin, you got legal mail." And when I went and got the legal mail, it was a letter from my lawyer. And that stopped me from really taking myself out. And the miracle actually, that saved my life. But I met a Jewish young lady. Her name was Ora. And I asked Ora, the father was a rabbi, and I said, and the Innocent Project had her come and see me, and I was like, she asked me, "Calvin, I want to sing you something for Christmas." I said, "No, this is what I want you to do. I need you to do this for me. Ask your father to bless me like a Jewish father blesses his child." And she did. And I always say the gates of hell opened up for me then. People that was always against me was for me. The prosecutors and stuff, on my own. But I knew I had to get a blessing because I had a lot of curses in my life. And in the book it tells you about these curses and stuff. It talks about this house that I lived in. It talks about how my uncle was trying to get rid of these evil spirits. You might say, this man must be from the South with this voodoo stuff, but it's not. That just was a thing in the South, and he was trying to kill these evil spirits. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what he did, but I knew that the only way I'm going to get out, I'm going to make it through this is that I had to get blessed.
Yeah.
And I did.
And you did.
Yeah.
One of the things you talk about is one of the reasons you wanted to write the book is to show that black men working together could get something done. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so all my life, and this is not just for me, it's for most, and I'm not making this a race thing. It's just something about, like especially in the South, I don't know how it's going on up here. But our life is meaningless. We used to sing prison songs when we was kids, that the crime that we was going to go to prison for rhyme with our age. And if I would sing it for you all, but the time is running out. If we have enough time, I'll sing it. And we knew that we was going to either go to prison at a young age or get killed. We was experiencing the abuse that was really mentally messing us up. And then when I got to prison, I grew up with that salvage, with that viciousness. And then I tried to get away from it. And I go to this place in Portland, Oregon, called Mount Hood in the Job Corps. And I found so much peace there. And it was like, oh no, Calvin, you got to go do this. And they brought me back. And then now I'm in prison. I'm experiencing this viciousness that we fighting each other like we gladiators. And there's nobody there to help us. And then we started helping each other. We started educating each other, being kind to each other, teaching each other, helping each other figure out how we got here. And that actually, it was a good thing. But then I wanted, the world don't know about this. The world don't know there was once some black men in the darkest place in the world rose above our circumstances and started helping each other, started educating each other. The world was hearing, they gold, they salvages, they doing this, they doing that, but they're not hearing the good things. They're not hearing us grow and get healed from all of that trauma that we experienced. Like the program that Sophie was a part of, the visiting room, where it shows people, in prison serving life sentences. But I wanted to write the book because I wanted the world to know that there was once some black men in the darkest place in America that actually rose above our situation and did something for, that we could be always proud of.
And that comes through. So Sophie, to use a term that's thrown around in discussions about race, you in effect became a white ally. And how does that work for you? Because you're dealing, certainly race is a part of the conversation.
Yeah, I moved from Australia to New Orleans, which was a whole experience, culture shock for me. And I had in Australia, we have the issues I wanted to work on there and would have worked on if I had stayed there were very much around our treatment of Indigenous people in the criminal justice system. So we incarcerate Black people actually at the highest rate of any country in the world. I'm very ashamed of that as an Australian and feel a lot of responsibility as a colonizing country to respond to that great harm. But coming to the South, there were a lot of differences and some parallels there. And I had a whole new learning to do about what, the impact of history and slavery and race meant for people like Calvin in the justice system. When it came to actually the process of writing this book together, that was a journey as well because I think at the very beginning, we explored like writing it in the first person. But because I was going to be the one primarily doing the writing and Calvin sharing the stories, especially as his friend and someone who knew him really well, but also as a white Australian woman who couldn't have been from a more different background and set of life experiences. It just didn't take. I couldn't. Someone else could have done that, but I couldn't. So anyway, that's just to say that part of the joy of the book was actually figuring out how Calvin and I worked together in a deep way, and how we could just be as forthright and sort of plain-spoken about that as we could in how the story's presented. And it was a real joy, actually, just to find a way of working together and in telling Calvin's story that felt true to not just our differences, but also the friendship that we had. The book really came out of like a friendship that pre-existed it and will exist after it. And I think for me, that's the most special thing about the writing process.
We're gonna shift to questions in 5 or 10 minutes or so. So if you have questions and you want to use the QR code to put them in, they will start showing up, and we'll get to those in a few minutes. Calvin, one of the questions I was wondering about as I read the book, so this then 15-year-old girl who falsely accused you, presumably by now she knows you're out, she may even know you have a book. Has she made any effort to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so that young lady, some audience kind of like be saying, you don't sound angry enough. She made a mistake. Nobody had to convince me of that. I know I wasn't the person that killed her boyfriend. And a lot of people ask me, have you ever reached out to her? Have you ever tried to, And I'm like, why would I do that? And, if I'm quite sure in her mind, she did what anybody would generally do. Seek justice for a boyfriend. She thinks it's me. If that has helped her to get from point A to point B, I'm cool with that. It has helped her. Telling her right now, you got it wrong. Just imagine what it would do to her. She had been through enough crap. So I've never reached out to her. I'm hoping that when she do, and I'm quite sure she probably did come across my name, she probably, I'm hoping that she would walk away and say, something, I'm happy for him. I'm happy he was able to pick up the piece of his life, and I'm happy that he's dedicating the rest of his life to do good. And so I've never reached out to her.
Nor has she reached out to you.
No, has she reached out to me.
So I want to get to just the phase after being behind the walls. One of the things that happens when people come out, they don't want to order coffee because there's too many choices. What were that first year or two like for you after you came out and got back into the community?
Well, I generally say if you want to get a clear picture, and it's what, if you want to get a clear picture of reentry, what happens to us, if you go back and read the Old Testament when God freed the children of Israel, they prayed for something for so long and they got it. And once they got it, they had no clue that they had to put a roof over their head. They had to feed themselves. They had to get new communities. And their response was so repulsive to God that he wanted to punish them. And my point that I'm making is that for 28 and a half years, what I took for granted is what consumed everybody's life out here. How you going to pay your rent? We didn't have rent in there. How you going to make groceries? We didn't worry about that either. Clothes. The thing that consumed people's life out here, and they've been out here all their life, they struggle to do it. Now here we come, have no clue on how to get into this stuff, and so now we got to struggle. We got to try to figure out how we're going to do it. And society wants to tell us, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And so, to me, that's a clear picture of what happens when we come home from prison. Lucky for me, I was lucky. I came home to a community, and lucky for me, I had Sophie. Sophie was a part of my reentry. On our long rides to Shreveport, I needed to talk to somebody. I tried to go on dates. And just imagine what I'm talking to this woman about. I was in prison and this and that. How we walked the yard and how we worked on cases. Like, man, you institutionalized. What else are we talking about? Nobody actually gonna understand our behavior. And some of them, you know, they got angry at me saying, you know. But on my long trips with Sophie, I'm able to tell all this madness, that stuff that I experienced. And she listening to it. I sometimes say, I wonder if I'm driving her crazy. And that's how our friendship developed. And I would never have let anybody ever write about my story other than Sophie. Nobody would have, because I had people want to write. And I'm like, she wasn't. I didn't want nobody else to write it because I didn't trust that they was going to be true to it. Like my book talk about the warden. And I'm not going to how the wardens, how the lawmakers had passed the law to crush all of us. And I'm not going to tell you what the warden did. How the warden sided with us and say, it ain't going to happen on my watch. And how other people in prison, not just serving time, but the correctional officer, how other people came into the prison and gave us hope. I wanted that story to be told. My story is not about Calvin. It's about humanity. How when we pull out, how we get rid of all this garbage that people then put in our head, how we actually come together and how we do good things. So my re-entry was, I would always say, what I needed. I needed somebody to talk to. I needed somebody to understand. No, I can't. I can't figure out how to pay my rent. You've been out here all your life and you ain't never figured that you ain't mastered that one. But you want me to master it. I'm a master. I'm in that crazy place. How I'm gonna feed myself. In prison, the food wasn't that good. But guess what? I didn't have to worry about diabetes. I didn't have to worry about sugar, high blood pressure. Come home, now I got to worry about all. I'm eating McDonald's, Popeyes. I'm worried about clothes. I didn't have to worry about clothes there. And people say, well, man, I keep seeing you with the same. My daughter say, Dad, I'm going to get you a new suit. I said, no, leave me alone with my clothes. I wear the same clothes. But I'm saying that's part of our reentry.
Yeah. There's a story Sophie tells about when you guys were cutting vegetables together, which captures some of that. Like, what? Wait, can you tell us that story?
Yeah. Calvin and I would sometimes help in our office prepare for board meetings. You know, outside people would come in to meet in the office, and so we just prepare little plates, like here tonight, the tomatoes and the carrots and the whatever with the hummus. And this one time, Calvin had just been home for maybe 6 months or something, and there was a board meeting. I said, Calvin, you want to help me by cutting up the vegetables? And I just handed him a little paring knife, you know, just like a, and he just froze, looked at it. It's like, I don't touch those. And I was having a moment like, oh my gosh, what have I done? You know, Calvin said, that would have got me written up. That would have sent me to the dungeon for like a year. You know, so many small things.
Yeah, those little things when you come back.
Very little.
He said like feeling coins in his pocket, the weight of a coin in his pocket was like.
I got one more question. Dan, I'm not seeing anything on the iPad.
I think they enjoy us talking.
Joy says Phil knows what he's doing. She lied. So, for each of you, as we think about the justice or injustice system, what are some things we might do that might make a difference?
One of the things I would like for us to always remember, Martin Luther King used to always say this, when things was real tough, the Bull Corner and Governor Wallace, you know what they was tough. You think he who cannot be named is tough. These guys back then was tough. And Martin Luther King would always say, God has not turned this world over to Governor Wallace. And so one of the things I think that we can do is that to believe that God is still in control. And how he do things is through us. Our criminal justice system, they have one or two guys doing some evil stuff. They passing laws that causing serious harm Once we realize that these laws are causing harm, we have an obligation to go bring it back to them and say, did you know that this law is causing a havoc on other people? And I guarantee you, from my experience, to me that would be that Paul, like people talk about that Paul moment, that they realize, oh, and I'm going to give you an example of one guy. Louisiana had this law after Jim Crow Reconstruction. They went from having unanimous juries that applied to white men that was in prison, and they made them be non-unanimous, meaning you could convict a person in Louisiana even if all of the jurors didn't agree. That was in Louisiana and Oregon. When that issue became to the United States Supreme Court, they said, okay, it was perfect. Louisiana and Oregon could be different. And then years later, I got out and I realized that law was not in prison. I realized the law was causing harm because in some of my friends' cases that was innocent, two of the jurors had it right. One had it right, yet they still get sentenced to life and spend the rest of their life in prison.
Because in Louisiana, juries did not have to be unanimous.
And Oregon and Louisiana, they didn't have to be all of them. They didn't have to agree. When I got out of prison, I was in a library and I ran across this article that said that law, Louisiana law, was introduced for the sole purpose of preserving white supremacy. This ain't no theory. This is no fake news. It was wrote. They wrote this. They got together and said, you know why we're here, boys? To preserve. And they passed this law because at the same time, Supreme Court was saying, look, you got to allow blacks to participate in juries. But if a black, two or three blacks wind up on the jury, that law would guarantee that their vote would not count. So I went to a lawyer. I went to Ben. I said, man, look, this non-unanimous jury verdict was based upon preserving white supremacy. I said, we got to do something about this. And Ben would say, okay, you go find the cases, Calvin. And guess where I had to go find the cases? I'm a fan of the Lord of the Rings. I had to go to the land of Mordor. And I went and found the cases. And we litigated that. And we litigated it. We litigated 22 times. We petitioned the same United States Supreme Court and told them, look, I know y'all said this in 72, but I don't think y'all knew it was introduced for the preserve white supremacy. And on my camp, I used to go talk to judges, and all of them used to say, well, Calvin, that's just the law. And I'm like, if Martin Luther King felt that way, we'd still be in the back of the bus. And so we petitioned the Supreme Court would say denied and denied. And one of our petitions we actually put, don't make us file another one. And they made us file for like 3 more years. But then they finally heard a case on 23rd petition, and they agreed with us.
Yeah.
They agreed.
So even when it's hard, don't give up.
No, and then the message that they sent, and I know it's hurt in Louisiana feelings, it hurt in Oregon feelings. It said, look, you all going to have to comply with the rest of the world. Y'all have to, that non-unanimous jury verdict law is unconstitutional, and everybody that you got in prison did not have a jury trial. Oregon response was, thank you for correcting us all those years. We was wrong, and we're going to grant everybody a new trial and make sure that their jury was unanimous if they get the conviction. In Louisiana, our Supreme Court said, we're not going to act like Oregon. We want y'all to die in prison, and we're not going to apply retroactive. The point that I'm making is that when we see an injustice, it's just human nature to want to say, I'm going to do something about it. And that's just the way it seems to me, probably because I'm not educated. But I'm a very simple person. Simple mind. I look at things in a very simple way, but I ain't educated. I'll probably be the only person you probably ever met that got 2 law degrees. but I'm not bragging. I think the way we deal with this is when we see it. Sometimes when we see it, I think God allows us to see things. He let us to survive it, endure it, to do something about it. Because I really believe He's going to ask us, what did you do, Calvin? I'm not talking about y'all. I know He's going to ask me this. Calvin, what did you do for my people? And I ain't talking about the rich people either. What did you do for the poor people? What did you do for the people that was in prison? What did you do for the homeless people? What did you do to protect poor people from these powerful people that wants to crush them? And you better not tell me, I'm black. They was white supremacists. They was too powerful. And I can hear God say, did you ever read the story of David? That's you. Why you didn't do that, Calvin? Oh, well, I don't never want it. I want to say, I read about David a long time ago. And I think what we could actually do is be brave. Because the time gonna come, God gonna. I'm not trying to preach. He gonna ask, what did you do with the life I gave you? You better not tell me you was afraid. Because He said, great is He within you than He that's in the world. So tell me what. I don't want no explanation. But I'm just saying. I think God is going to ask us, what did we do for the people that He, especially Jesus, that Jesus loved? What did you do for those people? And I would hate to say that we did nothing.
So one of the questions is, when you speak to other incarcerated folks, and I assume you have chances to do that, how do they respond to your story? Does it seem unattainable to them? Well, that was great for Calvin, but we could never do that.
No, glad you asked that. I tell people all the time, there's more hope in that prison. Since I've been home, and this is an indictment. And I'm not, if this doesn't fit you, it doesn't fit you. But I've met people, and I often say, there's more hope in that prison than out on these streets. And that is crazy to me. People in prison is very hopeful that God is still in control, that the outside world, once we tell the outside world that these laws are causing harm, they're going to rise up. They're going to do what they need. It's more hope to me in prison. And I know prison is a dark place, but the guys maintain their hope. And I often tell lawyers when they go into prison, do me one favor. Don't go in there and try to take their hope from us. But on the outside world, it seems like people just, not everybody. It seems like we can't do anything. And then people in prison is like, I could do everything. As long as I'm doing it with respect and dignity. And so when I do go into prison, and they see me, and I'm going to share this with you, because I know our time is running. I'm running the same court that deprived me of my record that you're going to read in this book. And I'm not going to cold call people. I'm doing what I'm, back then, when I saw injustice, I did something about it. That same court, I'm running for office on that court. I'm trying to take control of that same court.
Yeah.
Serious. And you know what brings me so much comfort? I want to modernize the office, and I'm going to tell y'all how I got out of prison. What brings me is like what really blesses my soul. That them guys on the inside, you know what they're saying? Calvin ain't going to never give up on us. Calvin's on the outside fighting for us. He ain't fighting for us to get out of prison. No. He ain't fight for us for them to, people to go commit crimes and cause victims. No. Calvin is fighting for us because he believed that we all entitled to access to the courts. The court's doors should never be closed. We have a criminal justice system that the doors are closed and we have to pry it open. Yet we tell the world that we this and we that and we this and we that, And within ourselves, we know that that's not true. Our court doors should never be shut. It should never. And they know that I'm fighting every day that the court doors are always open. Somebody might say, well, Calvin, they're abusing the system. It ain't by coincidence that the half of the Bill of Rights was introduced, passed, ratified to protect people that the government is after to destroy. It's not by coincidence. Yet, we kind of like forgot that. But it brings me joy to know that they know that. They always, I used to teach the law class. I taught for 15 years. And them guys used to always, I used to always tell the guys, man, whenever I get out here, I'm going to law school. And you know what they were saying? Man, Calvin crazy. Calvin ain't never getting out. And when I got out, I went to law school.
There you go.
Speaking it into existence. And it blesses my heart for them to know that I'm still on the outside. I'm still trying to correct the injustice that they're experiencing every day. And they know that I'm going to always continue that. And somebody actually said, Calvin, why you continue to do that? Several reasons. What happened to me, I don't never want it to happen to nobody else. Second of all, I'm trying to build my resume, not for a job, but for that day when I have to, go to, if you're Catholic, you go to St. Peter and say, all right, I'm here now. They say, well, why should I let you in? Like, look what I did. I helped this guy. I helped that guy. I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. I got baptized. I opened the doors for people. I smiled at them. I fed the homeless. Sophie was talking about where I worked at. I used to feed the homeless. I was 17 years old. And I used to sneak them in there. They had all that food they're going to throw away. You're not on my watch, you're not.
Yeah.
And then a guy was so upset with me. And I think what would have really got him on my side, I stole his jacket. And I gave it to a homeless person. It was cold that day. And he knew I took his jacket. And I wanted him to know, you better leave me alone. And I think he did, because he was cold that day. And I took it and I gave it to somebody, look, this is your jacket. And he left me alone. But they was throwing the food away.
Yeah.
Talking about what the rules say. I don't hear nothing about no rule and somebody getting hungry. They hungry. Or the rules say you're not supposed to be in a hotel room. Y'all got a lot of money. Let them take a shower and take a nap and all that stuff. Get them some food. But I'm a talker since y'all don't want to act.
I love that he said, these aren't our guests. And you in effect said, yeah, they're our guests too.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think you talked to some law students earlier today.
Yeah.
So a couple of folks have marked this question. Well, what kinds of things would you say to encourage undergraduate law students and graduate students in their pursuit of truth to help others?
Okay, so the truth thing is throwing me off. But what I tell them is that if they're in law school, they're embarking on a profession that they take an oath to defend the Constitution, to help people with dignity. They take an oath to do it, and they should have courage to do it, which means the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, the First Amendment. Those are the laws that we actually take an oath to defend and make sure that it's, because those are our liberties. And we defend them. Lawyers take an oath to defend them. And think about that. You're getting in so much debt to get this education. And that those amendments need to be defended. Because they got a lot of other people defending the free speech. I don't think they need no help. The second, I don't think they need no help. But what I generally try to convince law students is that at the end of this, you take an oath. You in boot training to defend these liberties that we have. And that is, and they work defending. And we should all continue to defend them. And if we don't defend them, they're going to be taken away from us.
We got about 5 minutes yet. I want to try and sneak in 2 more questions. One is, you mentioned Lord of the Rings sort of in passing, and I know in your book there's other references. Can you speak to the role literature and stories have played in your life?
Yeah, like the book starts off with David Copperfield, whether I should be the hero of my own life or whether that station would be held by somebody else. That would have been my guiding principle. I'm going to be the hero of my own life. I'm going to be the one to sit back and say, you know something? I'm proud of that fella named Calvin Duncan. And then there's another part that I rely on that book is being of use. No matter where you're at in life, no matter what your circumstances, you have to be of use. That's just a natural thing that we all have to be busy while we're here. And so those are some of the literatures that I actually held on.
Yeah, the Cedar House rules.
And that was the Cider House rules.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite movies for lawyers in the audience is The Bridges of Spies, where Tom Hanks represents this spy. And the way he represents him, even when the case is over, how he represents him. I'm not going to tell you, but if y'all go look at it, his relationship with this spy, and I'm calling him a spy because there was no doubt that he was a spy, and Tom Hanks challenging, he didn't want to do it, but he took on it. Once he took it on, and then in the end, when it's time for this spy to go home, his relationship was torn, like. And so I'm often telling lawyers that's you have to build these kind of relationship with your client. And like you said, one of my favorite movies, I watched that movie over and over and over and over, The Lord of the Rings, because they was fighting, and people said, well, that's a childish. That's not the way it's real in my mind. They was fighting for Middle Earth.
Yeah.
And so our question is this stuff that we enjoy, these liberties that we enjoy, is it worth fighting for? And so I kind of like take these novels and put them in people. Because I had to teach law in prison for 15 years, people that couldn't read and write. I wasn't going to tell them, look, Rehnquist said that just because you wasn't going to get a GED, just getting a GED is not going to give an axe murder a parole. I had to make law interesting and give them hope that it's work. Like imagine a firm, somebody coming to this country and saying, I'm going to take all Americans' liberties from them, one by one. I know what's going to happen in the South. Them guys got machines. They got a whole house full. They got military in their own house. We're going to actually fight back. And so the same thing that I would all generally say in my mind is it Lord of the Rings, that we fight for these liberties that we actually got, and we need to fight to keep them.
Joy, do we have time for one more, or do you want to wrap? Okay, so this is kind of a I'm going to send this one to Sophie because it's a variation on it.
Because I'm long-winded. Go ahead. Go ahead, Phil.
You said that, I didn't. What do you think are the ways, or the way to start changing the system beyond just little adjustments? So that we can protect it for the future, for the criminal justice system. What are the things we should focus on?
I mean that is a big question.
Yeah. You got 2 minutes.
But I would say, there was a time in the U.S. where when people went to prison, they weren't walled off. There wasn't this idea of us and them, or that they'd be erased from our view and the landscape of our communities forever. In the 50s, people would be allowed to leave prison to go spend Christmas with their families. They were allowed to leave prison to go work and then be expected to come back the way Calvin would have if he'd been allowed as a jailhouse lawyer. The way that it is today is not the way that it's always been. And that's kind of a lie that's being constructed to make us accept how it is now as though it's normal, but it's not normal. These penitentiaries we have with these concrete walls, and we have people serving life sentences in prisons where they don't get to see sunlight. The Supermax in Oklahoma is below ground. I mean, these are just inhumane, intolerable situations we've created and put people in, and we've shut them out of our communities. And I think a lot would change if we started to work to make those walls more porous again. Because the more that we understand we're actually all belong to the same community, the more unacceptable those kinds of things will become. And so my way of trying to distill that down is just what Calvin would say, which is like, take somebody that you think needs to see inside a prison to a prison. There are actually a lot of ways that you can get inside prisons, and there are people here tonight doing incredible work inside prisons in this state that we got to meet earlier, who would gladly take, an interested person in to meet with people. And I think the more that we do that, especially if those people include judges and legislators and governors, which was, again, very common in the 50s and 60s, I think we would see change just because we would start to understand that these conditions we've put people in are unacceptable.
Thank you. So Joy's going to wrap us up here in a minute. If you want to follow Calvin, he has a website. It's complicated. CalvinDuncan.com. You can buy his book. They'll autograph it for you. And thank you all for being here and for just being really engaging in the conversation with us.
Thank you.